Hello and welcome to another Reaconteur video, and in today's video I'll be talking about why Deepwoken's lore is still terrible, and some new lore that was recently added is also quite bad. Make sure to subscribe since only about 20% of the people watching right now are actually subscribed, and I'm currently live on Twitch ranking white girl songs, so drop in for that. Now let's get straight into it. Alright, so first of all, recently the developers added faction jobs. This is just a way for players to get notes without having to scavenge or sell items, but the way they implemented it in lore is quite questionable. They made it so that the Luminants had to turn to Pathfinders to complete the work that they don't have the manpower to do. This means that the world of Deepwoken just recently entered an economic recession, and they're doing this as a way to stimulate the Deepwoken Etris economy. And honestly, I can understand why. This lore makes sense. With the values of enchants and legendaries plummeting, since we're getting a new legendary weapon every week, the value of the Etrian note is going to be decreasing due to legendary weapon inflation. As legendaries and enchants become more common, their value decreases and floods the Etrian economy with more notes, since the antiquarians may also double as the mints within Deepwoken. How else do the antiquarians have seemingly infinite notes? Well, simple. The Lord Regent has given permission to the antiquarians to produce more money as stimulus to help the economy. But this power given to the antiquarians in combination with how common enchants and legendaries have become over the years has resulted in inflation and now economic recession, meaning new government-funded jobs are opening up in an attempt to help restore the economy of the Deepwoken world. Now, this could also just be more communist propaganda supported by Deepwoken, as this could just simply be workers' unions being supported by Deepwoken's government to promote communist ideals, which I wouldn't put past the devs, seeing as how the entire ocean is a metaphor for communism, and the drownings are a metaphor for capitalist greed. But hey, that's just a theory. Now, while the new jobs are integrated in a way that makes sense, you wanna know what doesn't make sense? The amount of terribly cursed weapons in this game that just aren't worth using ever. Legendaries used to be so simple. Sword with wind imbued into it. Bigger sword with shadow imbued into it. Axe with ice and ice soul imbued into it. Now we have the Soulthorne, which is supposed to be a sword where the core of it was siphoned from the souls within the moon's eye, but using it drives the user to insanity because the fractured souls within it speak to you and whisper schizophrenia into your ears. Why would anyone use this? Ever. Like, actually. There are weapons that'll talk that won't make you kill yourself, and there are weapons that just aren't pseudo-sentient. So why would you want this thing anyway? It just sucks. And also the Nocturne, in lore it's supposed to be kind of like Thor's Mjolnir. The more impure the user is, the heavier the weapon gets until you can no longer wield it. But by that logic, why is it even in the game? You cannot really expect me to believe a single person playing Deepwoken in the Deepwoken universe could ever wield this thing, right? Like, actually. You actively murder petty thieves, probably kingdom guards. You keep on murdering the same guy over and over again as penance for making stone golems. You overfish, reducing wildlife populations in the ocean. The ironclad is the leading cause of pollution in Etris. You keep murdering the same guy over and over again because he's in a time loop. You feel no remorse for your fallen comrade Kenneth. You murder the same guy over and over again to get duplicates of his prized dagger, even though he literally left Etris to be alone, and yet you go to his island and home to murder him. You chop down trees all the time without replanting, which is bad for the environment. Do you see where I'm going? By what measure is the Deepwoken player at all pure of heart enough to wield this weapon? Unless the Deepwoken player is just infinitely strong like Doom Guy, in which that would actually make more sense because the weapon's weight scales over time. And we know Deepwoken characters are unrealistically strong, capable of lifting enemies 50 times larger than you with mantras like Fire Grab. So maybe the player's strength simply scales over time from wielding this blade. Would make more sense, but then that also brings up the fact that Deepwoken characters are unrealistically strong and undeservingly so. You're telling me I can only hold up a boulder over my head for maybe 40 seconds before my arms collapse and I die, but I can effortlessly lift a Mama Thresher with no fatigue by using Fire Grab? Yeah, okay. Highly believable. Now for something I've never talked about, the dread serpents commonly known as the Kaido. Well, first of all, they're clearly an infinite feedback loop. In lore, a dread serpent is formed when someone drowns while feeling mass amounts of dread or fear or anger, or basically just a lot of really negative emotions. Clearly, dread serpents create more dread serpents because having to fight this thing to get Ardor makes me feel enough dread to turn into one. Regardless, as a lazy lore inconsistency, it's simply unknown why killing them provides you with Ardor. It's never explained in the lore because writing that would be too hard. Instead, they just left it a mystery. What isn't a mystery though, is that they're still obviously feeling dread as they live. The reasoning, because they're the worst boss fight in the game and they're aware that everyone hates them. Devs, please rework the fight. Maybe then there would be some, less of them because less people would be experiencing the pain of fighting these guys. And also, the first Dread Serpent was created when someone ate an Edenkite's heart. So first of all, why? Why would he eat an Edenkite's heart? It clearly didn't help him since he became this monstrosity, so he didn't have any extrinsic reason to do it. But also, if he was just a cannibal, you may be thinking, well, what if he was a cannibal, right? Well, that wouldn't have made sense either, because the heart tastes terrible and doesn't cook well. The lat muscles, quadriceps, glutes, yes, the glutes, and the chest muscles are the best parts of the human body, with organs, especially the heart, being generally terrible to eat, especially without modern technology that can't cook well. So the devs just didn't give us any reason for why this guy would have eaten an Eating Kite's heart. So I really don't understand how this would have ever happened. Hello, editing Reaconteur here. Apparently eating an Eating Kite's heart gives you infinite wisdom, but also if you can't handle that infinite wisdom, it'll just transform you due to all the despair that comes with infinite wisdom. So the guy who ate the Eating Kite's heart got turned into Kaido because he was just a pussy and he couldn't handle all that. Also, can we talk about how much lore just doesn't contribute to the gameplay? We know the second prophet gave chasers blood powers, and yet there's no oath for blood powers with any sort of ministry prophet or a new chaser quest at all. And wasn't layer 2 rating supposed to come out like a year ago, and that just didn't come out? Now back to the old Lord Regent. The throne apparently grants incredible power. As when asked if the old king of Etris was boosted by the throne, he kinda just responded with a weird smiling emoji. So likely, yeah, the chair boosts the person sitting in it. Now 2 things. The chair brings the Lord Regent from Akira level to capably beating Akira with low difficulty, which would be pretty easy, but Akira is a fraud who clearly relies on his bell, Top Pop, to beat people weaker than him, while running from the real bad guys. But anyway, why exactly is this chair magic? It's a throne, yeah, but what makes it draw power from the depths? Is it a curse, an enchant? It's never explained, and even if it was, that kinda sucks, because imagine getting stronger at the cost of being basically eternally paralyzed. That's not even somewhat worth it. I'm sure the Lord Regent could go into a training arc to low diff Akira, instead of sedentarily strengthening himself by sitting in a chair for thousands of years. One other thing that we know is that Duke Arisia puts his souls in the golems to power them, and he steals these souls from people. But if the golems run on the souls of the mindless servants that he takes from them, that he has, then what do the mindless servants run on? Clearly the soul is like a battery, but if the servants don't have souls, then how do they have the ability to do anything at all? Simply just doesn't make sense. And also, the Duke's name is Ishaman. I just don't like that. Next, Maestro Evangard is stated to be as strong as Pleetsky under the circumstance that he can activate his Unknown Tempest Eye ability. And yet he won't just go dethrone the Lord Regent by himself because he's afraid of a little war? Pleetsky is like the second strongest being in the verse, excluding Meatlord, and he's only barely weaker than the first prophet Deepwoken who discovered Shadowcast. We'll talk more about Meatlord later, by the way. But regardless, this means Maestro Evangard has like top 2 potential, and yet still hasn't killed the Lord Regent in 400 years. And also something that highlights how lazy the devs are. Akira's katana has no strap, so instead of the devs adding a strap or scabbard or sheath, they simply made it canon that Akira's katana floats around with him, with no reason behind it. Like bro, his bell pops people's heads, it doesn't make things float. Give a scabbard to the man, please. And also, I've already talked a fair deal about Pleetsky in my last few lore videos, but quoting Archmage, Pleetsky is a chill guy. Yeah, I bet he's chill with how much drugs he's doing down in layer 3. He's huffing some crazy fumes to think fire is speaking with him. You're really telling me the flames talk, but only specifically to the guy who ate a random herb he found in layer 3 in the depths? Bro, the last time a random herb was eaten and someone started hearing voices was April 20th of 2727 BC, and that was weed. Pleetsky found some sort of super drug, and now he thinks the flames talk to him, which is why nobody else can talk to the flames but him. He's geeked out of his mind, and people just believe him. Now time for some meat lore. Lore about the Meat Lord. Generally, he is theorized to be either an incarnation or straight up dorgan from Rogue Lineage. Now this is important for a lot of reasons. First of all, as stated by the developers and testers, if the Meat Lord were to fight every drowned god, Deepwoken, ascendant being, every player, every creature, and everything at once within the Deepwoken verse, he would win with little or no difficulty. Now that's very important. Secondly, he loves selling meat. It's his passion, which is why he would rather do it and sell meat than being a warrior despite his great power, or even a god despite his great power. And the same can be said about Dorgan and Big Haas from Rogue Lineage. Dorgan is Rogue Lineage's meat vendor, along with his 2 brothers who sell meat and his other 2 brothers who sell turnips, who are all roughly equal in power. So Dorgan, Dorgan, and Dorgan are all selling meat. Now this is very important. If they're all equal power, it could explain why the Meat Lord can be in multiple places selling meat at once. It could just be all 3 of the meat selling Dorgans going around to sell meat at different places. 3 Meat Lord spawns, 3 Dorgans, 3 Meat Lords. Dorgan is confirmed to be taught by Big Haas, but he does now rival Big Haas in power as they are all multiversal level beings. There are also their other 2 brothers, Dorgath and Dorgoth, who may be affiliated and could have potentially even been selling meat in the Deepwoken universe before their blood pressure got too high and they started eating turnips to help lower it. Regardless, this means Deepwoken may be a prequel or a sequel to Rogue Lineage. Now you may think it's obviously a prequel because Big Haas isn't in Deepwoken and he taught the Dorgans, but we don't see him, right? But that doesn't mean he doesn't exist. There is that possibility he's just somewhere else, or he's sitting in some astral plane. Regardless, we know the Deepwoken world is essentially destroying itself itself. But we also know attunements didn't always exist, so that means Rogue Lineage could be an ancient time before attunements, which explains the lesser technology and more crude civilizations. But it could also mean that after the Deepwoken world is drowned and destroyed, it is reborn, albeit smaller, with the new limited technologies and weaker gods that now that all the old ones have died, leaving the world of Rogue Lineage to fend for itself with new rules. Now you may be thinking, well, if Deepwoken is a prequel, then why aren't the depths and stuff in Rogue Lineage? Well, it's the Elden Ring. In Elden Ring, the user of the Elden Ring changes the fundamental attributes of the Land Between. You can change life and death itself if you wish to. If a powerful enough being such as Dorgan or any of the Dorgans or Big Haas were to harness the power of all the drowned gods, which we know they have the strength to do, they could fundamentally change the way that life and death and reality work in the world, shaping it into a world where there are 5 cities for the 5 brothers who sell 5 types of food. Gaia was created after the destruction of the Deepwoken world by the Dorgan brothers as a way to sell more food. You see, they love selling meat, but there were 2 limiting factors to the amount of meat they could sell: the way death worked and the lack of still shops. People going into the depths and being immortal prevented life, which died, from coming back to buy meat from them if they were too weak to come back into Etris. So, reincarnation of the soul would mean they had a finite and always optimal amount of people to sell to. So upon obtaining godly powers, they made life and death reincarnation, and they removed Deepwoken soul immortality so they would always have people to sell food to. Then, they each made a city to their own liking, where they would be the primary source of food for the people, providing meat and turnips for all, holding a monopoly over food, but also being able to do what they love, which is selling that food. So they all hung up the authority armor, revealing their Oni garment as they were trained by Big Haas, and they now rest easily, selling food and pursuing their main passion. And if you're wondering about K, well, K was made as the perfect breeding ground for monsters of all types, so that way the Dorgans could have a steady supply of meat. This lore truly was our Rogue Lineage. Deepwoken. Prequel Deep Lineage Woken. So, if you think this makes sense, drop a subscription, but I know that this is the lore of Deepwoken. Shoutouts to Jake, Kennick, Cyberboy21, and Drizzy Drake fan. I've cooked way too hard, the FBI is after me and I must go. I love you all, and goodbye.